And good afternoon, or good evening, or good morning, depending upon where you are around the world. I'm Marcus Holmes, the HR Passion Guy. And as always promised, I bring you exceptionally passionate people living in the center of their purpose on purpose to inspire and ignite you to do the same. So if you're watching us here live on LinkedIn Live, which I'm trying to verify, we had a little bit of technical challenge. We're also live via Restream on YouTube events, Twitch TV, and Facebook Live. I hope that you will click share, tag 5 of your closest connections or subscribers, 5 of the more popular ones to join in this live today. You don't want to miss this gentleman. And in the midst of my LinkedIn streets, I happened upon Black Inclusion Week, which primarily seems to be in the UK. Shouts out to all of those across the African and Black diaspora worldwide, but specifically amplifying voices of great Black excellence there in the UK. And so I'm learning more about Black Inclusion Week. So I've asked this guest to join us, and I'm hoping that we are tracking live across all platforms. Still looking for my LinkedIn Live folks to check in. Hopefully we are live there as well. All right. Had a little bit of technical challenges and difficulties. We're going to keep it moving and keep it rolling. Looks like it's not live there. All right. So we're going to keep it moving. We may have to upload the entire broadcast. We'll do that with no problem. And so I'm excited to have this gentleman here with me. And I'll share a little bit of his bio. From his mini bio, he is the most interviewed customer growth expert in Europe. 10 years in sales, account management, and sales leadership, supporting teams of over 400 before running his own companies. His first book made the top 18 books on sales to read in 2019 in Inc. magazine. He's a proud dad of 6, 5 girls and 1 boy. The moderator and contributor to thought leadership platform for tech executives called techpros.io, course director and growth advisor to over 200 subject matter experts in collaborations with Bain's Business School. He runs, owns, and co-founded 7 companies. He says 2 mass failures, 2 sold, and 3 running today. So many stories to tell, and hopefully we'll get to glean from some of those stories. He's a customer fanatic, lover of autobiographies, Batman faith, podcast, bass guitar, basketball, Jamaican food, and Dr. Pepper. Varied tastes and talents. He has a vision to create 1 million sustainable jobs, an economic vehicle for vulnerable families in underserved communities in the UK, Africa, and US. Contributed to over 300 jobs so far, and I'm sure that's growing. Degree in German and economics and a master's in behavioral psychology. I'm excited to have with us international speaker and growth expert, Jermaine Edwards. Jermaine, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, so happy to be here, Marcus. And man, I'm loving your infectious attitude and energy.
Well, thank you. I hope I hope it is just that. I hope it is just that, Jermaine. And I'm excited to have you. I was excited to see Black Inclusion Week.
Yes.
And even though it's a kind of a targeted focus for the UK, I think worldwide, globally, I think we have to be intentional about amplifying Black voices. And so I'm excited to see the work that's happening in UK. So tell us how you learned about this work and how it aligns with the work that you do in growth.
Yeah, well, like a lot of people, actually, I wasn't necessarily immediately familiar with it. So I actually saw a post on LinkedIn. I had made a comment to say, hey, I'm in support of it. How can I help? And then I was approached by some of the original founders of the organization to be part of their speaking team. And as part of that, as I began to look at their initiative and their passions around creating strong communities, advocating for really positive change in many different areas that were close to me, particularly in areas of change around the perceptions of the Black community, particularly across economic forums, but just overall just celebrating achievement across an area in which sometimes even in the Black community, we don't necessarily celebrate ourselves enough. And so it was about an opportunity to be part of something that is going to elevate the voices that are often unheard.
Mm-hmm. Elevating the voices that are often heard. I read in your mini bio, that you want to create 1 million sustainable jobs. So talk to
That's
us
correct.
about, I mean, that seems like an amazing goal and objective. Talk to us about how that came to be.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So I came back about, I'm going to say 1993. I had the opportunity to, at that time, I went to work with my mother at the time. She's working for one of the largest paint manufacturing companies in the UK. And I remember being there. I was a young lad at that time, only 11 years old, I believe.
Wow.
And I remember going there and being in the boss's office. And I remember kind of walking in and just being so taken back by the power and authority that a boss has. You know, the big office, the chairs, the kind of mahogany table. But I was there. I remember very, very distinctly somebody running into the office. It was a woman holding a note. She went to the owner of the business at the time. He got on the phone and he seemed really exasperated, really challenged, perhaps, quite concerned in his tone.
Mm.
And at the end of maybe a 25-minute call, he threw down the phone and said, "The money's gone. The customers aren't coming back, and we're letting everyone go." And instantly at that point in time, I knew that not only my mom was about to lose her job, but 200 other people were about to lose their jobs that day.
Mm.
But two things really stood out for me. He said, the money's gone and the customers aren't coming back. And for whatever reason, at 11 years old, that really stuck in my mind. And so it was some years later, probably about, I'm going to say almost 20 years later, that same recurring theme came back. And actually, it was me on the other side. I was the one saying in a failed business that the money's gone, the customers aren't coming back, and we're having to let everybody go. And suddenly it hit me that I'd literally rehearsed the same situation that I would be in
Wow.
20 years later. And
Wow.
it was that point in time I said, how do we create a vehicle where we become not only irreplaceable to our customers, that we're providing so much value that actually we can become a place they never want to leave, but how do we create a vehicle for sustainable opportunities so no one ever has to worry about whether or not they have a job tomorrow or not? And so that kind of became the impetus of reestablishing and reinvigorating not only my professional career and how I became a better business owner, but actually how I created multiple different vehicles to support people who might not necessarily have the power to go and start businesses and create this kind of opportunity themselves. So that's where the impetus came from.
Oh, wow. What an awesome story. We're talking with Jermaine Edwards, international speaker and growth expert. I want to talk to you a little bit about, you talked about these failed companies and having to say, the customers aren't coming back, and shifting your thinking to sustainable customer relationship,
Mhm.
I would say, customer retention, customer growth.
Exactly.
How does diversity or do Black voices being amplified factor into that?
Yeah, well, it comes down to vulnerability, and so vulnerability can show up in different ways. It could be vulnerability in terms of financial power. It could be vulnerability in terms of access. It could be vulnerability in terms of proximity and where you are. So the range of ways in which people can become vulnerable. And so as soon as I looked at this area here of voices, what I asked myself is, in what particular area could these voices be amplified in which it meets my specific outcome of being able to provide economic outcomes? And so what it took me down was a road where it's, if I can then create an opportunity for people to hear my story, could I get people to communicate with me, and could I then give them an opportunity, rather than a handout, give them a hand up and say, hey, here are some opportunities, and let's get you skilled up, let's get you equipped and ready, and let's get you ready to make a change and completely change the trajectory of your own family and otherwise. And so that's where I saw it. I guess from a selfish note, I wanted to tell my story. I wanted to get people inspired and attracted, get in front of more people and say, hey, it's possible for you not only to change the trajectory of where you're going, but your entire family as well. But it takes an opportunity for you to say it's for me, and sometimes you need somebody like you to say it's for you, and it's possible for you. And the second thing is to say, actually, you have access to what you need to get started. And then the third thing is you having the support you need to keep going. And so as long as you have those things there, wanting to be that place, and the Black Inclusion Week was a great place to begin to really answer those three questions. It's one, tell them that they can do it, give them access to the platforms to say, hey, you can start today, and then give them to support saying you're not alone in that journey.
Yeah, I think it's important, all three of those, but one of those that really resonates to me, and I hope will resonate with viewers, is that you're not alone in the journey. And
Mm.
I think that that is so important, to align yourself with like-minded people, or people who have gone where you're trying to go. So kudos to you for that kind of work. I know I read in your bio you've talked to hundreds of subject matter experts, hundreds of organizations, maybe even thousands of organizations, about having this growth mind. Tell us, growth mindset, maybe I'll call it that, or this growth expertise, these strategies for growth. Tell us
Mm.
what has been one of your favorite outcomes from having these people that you've engaged with all across different types of industry and work.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I track every single year is how many jobs were saved and created based on our intervention, or collaboration and partnership with our clients or other distinct partners. And so over the last 5 years, we've had a total of 312 different opportunities or jobs created, and literally countless jobs saved, because we've been able to give people some strategies and ways in which they can sustainably work with their partners and clients to keep their clients longer, maintain revenue stability, and reinvest back into the business. So that's the thing I'm most proud of when we track that number. I mean, look, businesses will grow and go through a range of different challenges, but what's most important for me is, when I'm asking or speaking with business owners, is what are you tracking that's most meaningful to you in the business? And if I'm hearing revenue, then they haven't really understood that actually the vehicle of the business is meant to kind of derive itself around impact and who you're serving, and not just what you're actually collecting. And so for me, the place of who we're serving is most important. And that particular number is how many jobs are we creating, and how many jobs are we saving in the process.
And you said created 312 jobs. Do you know how
That's
many
correct.
jobs saved, or how much money? I think I read somewhere it was was it in one of the years was $250 million?
Yeah, so over the last 5 years, we've done over 250 million billion with our clients in terms of revenue generated through our interventions and strategies. Difficult to put a number to what jobs were saved, simply because we're working across kind of a large number of clients who have thousands of employees. So what we say is, typically, if we're looking at a subset, we look at a subset of departments and clients, and we say about 20%. If you're growing by 20%, then you're pretty much taking on 5% more in terms of headcount. So if I was to make the numbers right now, I'd say it's close to 2,000 people in
Wow.
regards to saved jobs.
Wow, that is impressive. And congratulations to you on such great work, phenomenal results. We're talking with Jermaine Edwards, and we're highlighting amplifying Black voices in Black Inclusion Week. And they have a banner there, Jermaine, that I just want to show. I put you as a
Yeah.
Black hero there for your hard work. Who would you say is your Black hero? Who would you say is your
Oh
Black?
man. Definitely my grandmother. Her story always inspires me when I think about it. Diaspora, coming from Jamaica, leaving seven children, and raising them by herself, pretty much.
Mhm.
And I mean, one story particularly comes to mind, where she had the story. She'd come over from Jamaica, and unfortunately was not given the warmest welcome coming to UK at the time, and she was waiting for a job outside of a hospital. And she literally had camped out and slept outside the hospital waiting for the job for days, and finally got an opportunity, and that became her opportunity then to work extremely hard, buy her first house, which is the first house that was ever kind of bought inside the family, and then that became the generational house that I can still visit today. And so her legacy, although she passed away some years back, still moves on, and really inspires me in terms of those difficulties and what she went through, to know that, hey, we have somebody who's already proven that, with determination, faith, and a true vision and mission behind what you're doing, knowing your family is counting on you to demonstrate a level of fortitude and integrity, that it can be done, and you can leave a legacy for other people.
Awesome. I know that you mentioned your mother and now your grandmother, and what enriching stories that you're sharing with us. It sounds like family is really important to you. And so you're a dad of 6 kids. Tell us about
Yes.
a little bit about being the dad of 6 kids. And I think I read 5 girls. Five
Five
girls.
girls, one boy. That's
So
correct. Yeah.
tell us about that.
Man, that's the hardest, the most fulfilling job on the planet. So my hat goes up to all mothers and fathers listening in right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think one of the big things with being father for me is the fact that you when you're showing up every single day, that you're always being seen,
Hmm.
and so that your response to situations is so important. I had this particular example not too long ago. I was having a fairly difficult week with the business, just a whole range of things taking place. I remember walking downstairs, grabbing myself a cup of tea and sitting down, and I kind of, for momentarily kind of put my head in my hands, and my daughter immediately caught me and said, "Daddy, you giving up?" I said, "No, sweetheart, I'm not giving up. I'm right here. I just needed a break. Let me go back and work." And
Hmm.
it's just that that kind of knowledge of seeing that, oh my gosh, the kids are seeing how we're responding. They know daddy does not give up.
Hmm.
He's not somebody who cows down and lays down the towel. He keeps fighting. And so it was just a reminder in those moments that, man, as a dad, as a parent, your kids are watching.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you, with them watching you, having done all of the work that you've done, what do you say that you do that's intentionally helping them to find their voices and amplify their voices? Because I think we have to start younger, right? We have to help our young people find their voice and amplify their Black voice. So, for your children, what are you doing that you might share with us that we could do with our children to help them find and amplify their voices?
Yeah, one of those things is actually giving them creative means to express that. So we have something called Family Game Night. Family Game Night, every single Sunday, we have the opportunity with what's called 3-minute mastery. So essentially, every single person in cycle once a month will have an opportunity to present something, so that they're really passionate about, something they're really interested in, something that they've learned. They could do that, through music. They could do that through visual arts. They could do that through a video. They could do that through some sort of storytelling. But I find sometimes just beginning that process of getting them used to sharing not only their heart, but things they're concerned about, but sharing in different creative ways allows them to express themselves confidently in a way in which is very different to other means of just kind of putting them and say, hey, go ahead and go speak to your friends or go outside and just go do something. That's not helpful. You have to train them inside before you can send them out. And so that's an opportunity to train them inside, get them comfortable with their own voice and speaking those things that they're really passionate about. And that's one way in which we do that every single Sunday with what we call 3-minute mastery, where somebody gets to creatively express something that they're really passionate about.
That's awesome. I want to pivot slightly. We're talking to Jermaine Edwards, international speaker and growth expert, um, to talk a little bit about one interesting fact that I read, or factoid that I think I read, is that you used to have a dance studio. Is that correct?
That
Tell us
is
the story
correct.
about how it came to be
Yeah.
that you were a dancer and a dance studio. Tell us how that came to be.
Yeah, so I was finishing my studies in Germany, and unfortunately, I hadn't learned the finance lessons that I did today. So I was a broke student in the university, and I remember I was walking home one evening, and I knew I needed to get a job because my funds were dwindling very very quickly, and I heard some noise coming from a studio that was just across the street from me, and I decided, hey, I'm going to go into the studio and figure out if they have any work, just so I can, even if it's just kind of stacking shelves, whatever it might be. I just needed some cash, so I walk into the studio, and the teacher immediately sees me. Now I'm dressed okay, but not necessarily anything specific, and she says, "Oh, are you the teacher?" And I say, "Yes, I am." And so instantly she gives me this book. She hands it over and says, "Okay, you're teaching the class in a couple of days. We'll see you later." Now I don't know who she thought I was, but at that point in time, I said, "This is my opportunity to not only create some to earn some money, but actually create something specific. So I
Wow.
went to literally to the music store down the street, and I bought a whole bunch of DVDs on choreography, on dance, and literally for 2 days I missed classes. I just studied choreography, and I learned all the dances in those DVDs. And I turned up to the class. I taught my first lesson without having had any dance instruction, got paid that day, and then literally began to build out a studio from there. So I was doing that work before, or up until I left and graduated, and then moved to the States for a little while before coming back.
Wow. I'm amazed that some would characterize that as hustle. Some would characterize that as savvy, but I think it also takes a little bit of guts to go in front of a class and teach them something that you just learned. But I love that story, and I thought it was amazing that you did that. I want to pivot again, and I want you to tell us a little bit. You talked earlier about failed businesses. I want you to give some advice to people who maybe have had a failed business opportunity or venture, about how they will get up and still continue to raise their voice, continue to hustle, continue to learn something new to make the next new something better.
Yeah, so I'm going to say something really, really honest here, and one of those things is that I'm still working on that.
Yeah.
And a part of it, so I'm somebody who's a man of faith myself, and I think if your identity is only in your work, your successes will go to your head and your failures will go to your heart. And so you cannot place your identity in the business.
Hmm.
So be very, very careful. I think it's really, really important that right up front that you focus on the mission, and the vehicle might change.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as you have a clear passion on who you're trying to serve, what your skill set really is, and crafting that, getting around people who can complement your skill sets and support you moving towards that mission and vision that you may have, the vehicle might change. But it's really important that you do not put your identity in your work, because your success will go to your head, and unfortunately your failures will go to your heart. And that's a difficult place to wrestle with, particularly because we know that in business you're going to have failures. It will be inevitable. But if your identity is in your work, it will crush you over time.
Yeah.
So you have to make sure that your identity is somewhere else, and you're focusing on the mission and vision. That's what I'd say.
I love that. I love that. I kind of say something similar, Jermaine, in that I think people have to get connected and focused, being a man of faith as well, focused on their being, because we really ascribe a lot of value to the doing, right? And not as much value to the being. So whether or not you've done successful things or is different than being successful. And so you said it more eloquently than I think I could. As a matter of fact, I may have to quote that, those things can go to your head and your failures to your heart, successes to your head, failures to your heart, if you aren't careful. I believe that, because I think we don't have enough appreciation for the value of just being. Each of us uniquely crafted and created by a creator who said there's value in you just being, right? And being connected and grounded in that helps you, I think, navigate any tough terrain, including what the world might say are failures. Those failures could be your biggest and greatest lessons to build to your next. But you're right. If you put them into your heart, it could throw you off course, and it could be a long road back to recovery for what you think you've failed from doing. So thank you for that. Tell us a little bit about this book that was a top seller, or a top, I think I read in 2019 on
19 it was, yeah, Inc. magazine. That's correct. And so,
yes.
yeah, that was my first book, and I wish I was more of a copywriter then, because the book title is terrible. But it did pretty well, because one of the things that was quite early in that day was around account management specifically, is that there weren't any present books that were specifically engineered to help somebody make day-to-day decisions on how they can have much better outcomes in relationships, in revenue generation, in retention with their customers. And so it came at a really poignant time. So it's called the Key Account Hack. And the idea here is that you're being given some hacks, a way to get into the mind of a client that you wouldn't necessarily have perceived before. And so the book did really, really well, still sells on Amazon today. But I'm in the process of writing 2 other phenomenal books based on my experiences today. They're likely to be probably a year or two out, but I'm really excited about these books, talking about the psychology of customer relationships, but primarily also looking at this whole idea of how you become the kind of organization your customers never want to leave. So I'm excited about those books coming up.
I'll be excited to get your current one and those coming. And I know that you've been through a journey as acquiring a mastery in behavioral psychology. So I'm sure
That's right.
some of that we're going to see a part of your evolution as you've moved as well, and
Exactly.
your thoughts in these books. So I got to go read the first one before the second one comes out. So I got a little time, I think you're telling me, between that one and this one. Um,
Indeed.
so I'd love to explore a little bit more about, maybe if you could tease us with a little bit of the concept of this key account hack. Maybe don't tell us a hack, but maybe, I'm still going to read it, but still.
Yeah, so I think the big premise is this: is that everyone works hard with and for their customers, yet many times the results don't show up consistently.
Mhm.
And we can get really frustrated. And oftentimes our default as business owners or as team members, as leaders, is to do more, is to spend more, rather than ask a different question, which is the question which the kick out hack kind of proposes in it, I guess initially, is what's influencing the result. Not what do I do, not what's happening, but what's influencing the result. And once you understand what influences the result, you ultimately then can change the trajectory of where the results go. And so it becomes a framework for helping you to understand what are the priority pieces that you could focus on that will help you get more consistency from your effort. Not adding more time, not adding more effort. It's considering you as a professional, knowing that you're putting in the effort, knowing that you're putting in the time. It's understanding what are we actually doing with the time that's making significant difference. And so it helps you to do that.
Mhm. Thanks. And it's available on Amazon currently, right? Can what
That's
other
correct.
outlets?
On Kindle, yeah, absolutely. Audio form as well as an audio book, which is perhaps the top seller of the book categories in that area. So there are more audiobooks sold every year than the actual physical copy or digital copy.
Okay. Another item that I see, a fascinating item, is that you love superheroes. So tell
Oh
us
man, yeah.
what superhero you feel like you're most like. And when you think about amplifying Black voices, what superhero or superheroes come to mind?
Oh, that's a good one. So I'd say so. My superhero favorite is Batman. Always been only because it was because it was the first comic book I ever got to actually pay for and read. So it was the first one I actually paid for with my own money as
Mhm.
as a kid. And what attracted me specifically to that is I always was fascinated with people who became superheroes without powers. And he was the first person I was really introduced to for that. And so that whole idea of being able to elevate to a superhero status without being gifted the powers to begin. And I think there's something about that even in the story of different groups, that
Mhm.
actually there is this place where you actually we sometimes put other people on the pedestal and we say, hey, they've been gifted these opportunities or these particular platforms, and they can feel like you're superhero-esque. And
Mhm.
you kind of begin at this place where you don't have any of that. And I think what superhero stories like that, with although Batman's a billionaire, quote unquote, but there's something else about this whole idea of starting with nothing and elevating to a superhero status without the privilege. There's something about that story that really intrigues me personally
Mhm.
around that. But as for Black voices, man, I actually love the the character Blade. I know he's a kind of a controversial character, but again, something about the suffering hero on a mission.
Mhm.
Um, and what's interesting about that this particular person is the story. How the story is that his mother is bitten by a vampire. She's alone. She's a single mom, bitten by a vampire. He then becomes contracted with the vampire virus, becomes somebody who then is on a mission to go and take these people down, these vampires, based on his what happened with his mother. Now, how do we think about this from a Black Voices perspective? I think for all of us start with some kind of I'm going to say, kind of chip on our shoulder or some sort of thing in our history
Mm-hmm.
that has and is shaping who we're becoming and decisions that we're making.
Mm-hmm.
In this particular situation, Blake had a decision to either seep in misery and say, I'm a vampire now, I'm just going to kill myself, I'm going to go do these other things. But he made a decision to choose a mission that would honor his mother's death and would actually go and right some wrongs and save other people in the process. And I think for Black Voices, you all have a story. You have something that's shaping you right now, and you're either choosing that story to shape you to do things that are going to be at your detriment, or you're going to choose a story to shape things that are going to be for your benefit and for the benefit of other people. And so for me, I think that the story here is this, that you get to choose what story that you tell based on your particular circumstance or your history, and you get to define what the next page is going to read, what the next page after that is going to read. And I think that empowerment behind the idea of stories and superheroes is what intrigues me most, is that you get to define and say what story comes next.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And so you mentioned earlier about mission. Tell us why you feel aligned to the mission of the Black Inclusion Week. Why do you feel aligned to this mission?
Yeah, because I believe in making the community stronger. I don't think we have enough exchanges where we're actually looking at, hey, where are our skill sets, where are our talents, and how do we forge that into a unified body that allows for these vehicles to go and make real change, not necessarily in the future, but right now. I know we talk a lot about the future, but actually, what about now? What about you lending your skills right now? Why don't you pick up the phone right now and go and encourage somebody, your brother, your sister, whatever it might be, within your group, and use that skill today? And so for me, the whole idea, the commitment to change was the thing that I was really moved towards, not change for the future, but change right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do we do things right now? And I think that active stance of doing things now is what I'm attracted to, and not these kind of future programs, which are still important, but I think we miss the opportunities what we could do right now.
Yeah. And are there two or three, one or two top things that need to change right now that you think that can be done?
Yeah, so I think we need greater collaboration between just diaspora groups in general. I think that, and I think perhaps because we have so many disparate groups that aren't necessarily as coordinated, I think that's something that a lot of people would attest to, that isn't as coordinated or connected as we possibly could be in terms of really galvanizing that talent and energy. I think we need to do something specifically around education, particularly when it comes to our Black kids and what's happening across theirs. We're failing them in many ways, and there's a lot of different failures across different systems. Different countries will have very different areas, but I think more than anything, as I see my own kids or I see those kids around me, I think there are so many opportunities for us to pass things on that we just aren't necessarily actively doing because we're so focused on ourselves. Again, it's this whole idea of the story, because we're so focused on the things that I want, we're not thinking about the things that other people need. And so it's this exchange of pain. Is that, are you willing to feel the pain of others, or are you willing just to look at your own pain? I said there's this exchange of pain that moves you either away from change or towards it. And so if you exchange your pain to looking at somebody else and say, how do we go solve that for that person? I think we're going to see much more of a powerful movement happen.
Mm-hmm. And the coordination of collaboration, or this galvanizing that you talk about, what are some of the activities that you would recommend that people do across diaspora groups to do that?
I think the first thing is acknowledging that one, with not your, I'm asking the question, am I part of any groups right now? That's part of the diaspora, and actually a lot of people who aren't. So I'd say look for organizations first and foremost that are within your facility or whatever that might be, who are actively pursuing things that are in line with your values and in line with the change that you're looking to see. Second is just get involved now in something that you believe you could contribute to. Don't be a consumer, be a contributor, and immediately go and see where you can add value. That's the second thing I'd say. The third thing I'd say is whenever you see other people, particularly within your group, that are doing well, go and celebrate them. Go and celebrate them. We don't do that enough.
Mhm.
Just go and celebrate other people. I don't care if you know them or not. If you see something positive that's taking place, go and celebrate people. You'll be surprised on the chain effect that takes place when people see visibly other people being celebrated. And so those are the three things I'd say. So acknowledge, contribute, and go celebrate.
Yeah, I think those are excellent. And I think those you could do across different types of organizations, right? Whether it's a community-based
Absolutely.
organization, ecumenical-based organization, or corporate structure, you could do. In
Without a
those,
doubt.
where do you see the role of leadership in helping these groups collaborate and coordinate? And via allyship or however, what do you see the role of leaders in this?
Yeah. So I guess depending on who you're leading and where you're leading, I'd say the first thing is acknowledging and saying, hey, how we as an organization or as a leadership team or as a leader right now, allowing for groups of individuals to feel seen, heard, and understood. That's number one. Is there something right now? So how are we doing that today? How well are we doing that today, if any? And what one thing could we do today that might enable us to move that particular initiative forward? So those are three things I'd say any leader could ask: how well, do we have it? How well are we doing it? And what one thing could we be doing different?
All right. We're talking with Jermaine Edwards, and as you can see, he is a passionate person living on purpose, and he's an international speaker and author, writing two additional books. Once ran a dance studio, loves Batman as a superhero, is the dad of 6 children, and a growth expert. So, as I pivot into this growth expert, because that's your expertise area, I'm wondering. Uh, when you are consulting subject matter experts or clients in organizations, that have some kind of structure and flow, um, do the conversations around Black voices come up in that conversations around diversity and growth? There is tons of data out there that says the more diverse teams in organizations outperform other teams in the organizations, and organizations that as a whole have more diverse teams are more innovative, more collaborative, and their bottom lines are in some cases 10x that of other competitors. So when you're talking to people about growth strategies, does diversity, especially Black voices, does that factor into the consultation?
Yes, I'm always talking about diversity of talent across a range of different subsets where a business is trying to meet particular organizational objectives. Whether or not diversity specifically in the realm of ethnicity is coming up, I have to honestly say no, not necessarily. But I do talk about in terms of diversity of talent and where you find talent and where does talent come from. So a question may arise such as how you open yourselves up to new forms of talent that could support some of your business objectives, and I might then offer specific channels in which they could be utilizing more effectively, more often, in regards to looking at the diversity of talent that may come across varying different groups. I'm still really passionate about those with disabilities. My wife and I will work across those particular sectors, but also for those who are within the Black community. Again, I'm introducing new channels in terms of where talent may show up. So I think I'm having a talent-based conversation, a diversity of talent, and where those talents could be tapped into. Just like particularly in the UK, European talent is so wide spoken in terms of where the outsourcing, and the bringing in of that talent, technical talent, might be, but nobody's really talked about some of the talent that's actually emerging in many different kind of Caribbean countries or otherwise, and the diaspora that obviously exists today. So it's just opening up those channels and saying, hey, where else can we tap into some of the best talent in the world, and making that much more prevalent to some of these businesses.
Yes. And so people that are interested in working with you, Jermaine, do they apply to work with you as it relates to your growth strategies that you deploy?
Yeah, indeed. They just simply go to the IA group, the Irreplaceable Advisory Group, or JermaineEdwards.com. They can then speak to one of my team members. We'll set up a consultation and see where we go from there.
Okay. And tell us the name of, I'm sorry, again, of your company is the.
Yeah, so it's the Irreplaceable Advisory Group. So it's the IA group or the IA Advisory Group, and JermaineEdwards.com. Either way, you can go. You can hit me up on LinkedIn if you want to. And myself or my team will take care of that, and we'll take care of you and your business and your team. Make sure you're thriving and in all areas with regards to your customers as well.
Yeah. Before I let you go, I want to talk to you a little bit about your own growth journey. We did talk earlier that you had other businesses. How many
Yeah.
businesses do you have currently?
It's currently 3.
Currently 3. And so you started out, I think I read you had 7. So that
Mhm.
means you sold some may not some may have been more lessons than um,
Oh yeah,
what you may have said
absolutely. Some big
successes.
abject failures. Yes, indeed. I'll call
Okay.
them that. They're big
Okay.
failures.
Tell me why you called them abject failures.
So I call them failures not because again sometimes you can be hyper personal developing, right?
Sure.
in sense of like a failure is simply a failure. It's failure because not because it didn't necessarily work, but because I put other people at risk.
Mhm.
I think there's a different kind of failure which is my own, which is I just mess up. But when you put other people at risk, I think that does become a failure.
Mm.
I think because and as business owners, we have to be very, very cautious with those things uh, because the decisions that we're making, we have teams, we have other people's livelihoods, and those things can become extremely costly for other people. So I call that a failure in that particular regard. That actually I put other people at risk when actually um, many of those things could have been avoided with some hindsight. Now, naturally, everything's better in hindsight. You know, when you look back and say, I could have done this and this and this, and those were the lessons learned, right? So you win some, you learn some.
Mhm.
But those were particular failures because it put my family at risk significantly, and it put other people at risk. Well, it did put my family at risk. At one point in time, I was um, significantly overburdened in particular debt from the business and a failed partnership and a whole range of different things. It took me about 18 months to get out of $1.8 million in debt from a failed project and a failed partnership and a partner who I should not have gone into business with. And the flags were there, but I ignored them. And so, yeah, there's a whole range of different lessons that's there. But I'd say, um, yeah, the lessons themselves are always learned from the person who's humble enough to accept um, their own decisions and the failed decisions in those moments. But also, I'm very, very conscious of the fact that when we put other people at risk, that's just irresponsible. And that I had to take that on myself and say, okay, we're never going to put other people at risk again. Or the risk has to be in the way in which it's structured, in the way in which protects other people. And I'm going to own those other mistakes if those are made.
What would you say is the biggest lesson that you learned from those failures that you've carried forward into your growth strategies?
Yeah, so I think for me, it's about who you partner with.
Okay.
It's about being slow to hire and quick to fire. And that includes partners as well. Sometimes you don't quite know who's who until they're in,
Mhm.
and you could do all the best due diligence, and sometimes it just doesn't quite work out the way that you want. So I think the big thing has been the people you have around you,
Mhm.
and making sure that those individuals not only share your values and that, but also um, that you have a particular space or a space where you can be honest with each other.
Mhm.
You can have people who share your values, but you aren't honest with them.
Mhm.
And I think if you don't have a space where you can truly be honest in yourself with people, I still think that's a really toxic atmosphere to be in. Even if you share the same values, if you don't have a space for real honesty, you can't possibly correct things quickly, support people well, or have a really healthy, sustainable business either.
Mhm. Important lessons that we're hearing and learning with Jermaine Edwards, international speaker, owner, growth expert, author, dad of 6, Batman aficionado. We're excited to have had you. And before we get to a close here, Jermaine, and we will rebroadcast this for those of you that will be watching this after the fact, because it looks like it did not populate to our platform on LinkedIn, but I see it's live on Facebook and YouTube events. Tell us a little bit about if there were a group of Black voices um, across the diaspora who felt that they aren't being heard or seen. What message would you give to them about being able to be heard and seen and making a difference in their specific areas of passion or purpose?
Yeah. So again, I'd say that you're you're not alone. That's easy for me to say that you're not alone, and that actually you have value. There are people who need to hear your story. You need to hear you see you show up in some way. Um, Really easy for me to say that. So let me be more of a big brother here with some hard truths that you're going to show up somewhere 20 years from now. The question is, where will you be? Where will you be? And who would you be? Who will you be is perhaps the most important question. So I say that who you will be is a decision that you can choose right now, even if you're not in the place where you want to be. So if you want to be somebody who is sharing your voice, I'm saying that person you can be right now. And if you're genuinely wanting to be that person, I'd say literally find me on LinkedIn, send me a connection message, say you've listened to this particular podcast, and say, look, I'm somebody who wants to share my voice, and I promise you, I will not ignore the message, and we could sit down together, and I will put you in the right direction. If that is the case, that is a promise I'm going to make right now publicly. If it's 100 calls I'm making, 1,000 calls I'm making, if you want to be the person that you know you can be a month from now, a year from now, 20 years from now, because you're going to be somewhere a month from now. The question is where you're going to be and who you're going to be. So if you want to be somebody who's speaking up, who's genuinely providing value in the marketplace, who's being recognized for the things that they do, I'd say you can start today. And I'm willing to put out a hand up, not a hand out, a hand up to say, hey, I'm willing to fight with you and to do something where you can be seen, heard, and understood.
That's awesome. And so I did put your website there, JermaineEdwards.com, if anyone is watching or watches the rebroadcast. And I believe that he's going to honor that word of giving you the opportunity to really take inventory and see where you want to be. Where do you want to go? How do you want to use your voice? I would just add to that everybody has a voice, and you gotta. I like that you broke out some different things that people can do. And one of the things I think each individual has to do is to acknowledge that you do have a voice. Maybe your voice doesn't have the platform today that you want. It might not have the reach today that you want. You may not have the audience of a customer base or a stakeholder base that you want. And you may not be bringing those people the value that you want to be able to bring them, right? Have the influence that you want to be able to have for good, right? Not influence for stature purposes, not influence to say that you have influence, but to influence for good, right? You may not have that place in your journey, but you're at a place somewhere in your journey and you have a voice. And you've got to acknowledge that your voice is called into this earth school to do and say something. And so that acknowledgement, I think, is key in first step. If you want to be included in any conversation, you can't just sit there. Of course, you can send cues. I don't know if anybody's reading the book Cues. There's a book out there that talks about cues. So there's nonverbal communication, right? But really, when there's a conversation, you want your voice to be heard. So you got to get in to be a part of the conversation. But before you do that, you got to acknowledge that you have a voice. And you got to work at commanding that voice and aligning that voice with the values and activities that are going to help you amplify that voice. So I'm so
Amen.
excited
Yep.
that
I
you
love that.
agreed to join with us, and happy Black Inclusion Week. I'm still learning up on it more and more. I've connected with a ton of folks relative to this, and I think I want to carry forward some of this work in the US and in other places where people, Black people especially, should amplify their voices across the globe. I think this is an awesome movement and initiative, and I certainly hope to see and hear much more about it. So thank you, Jermaine Edwards. Did you have any parting words that you wanted to say before I let you go?
No, listen, I say the words that you had were just wonderful to wrap up. Again, just some encouragement to everybody to say, hey, you can start now. You can start now. And like I said, Marcus and I are both here. You can look at our content, be inspired by that, hopefully. But the office still stands for that person who's looking to open up their voice, raise their voice. Please get in touch.
Excellent. Jermaine Edwards, thank you so much for joining us. What time is it there in London and what is the weather like? I'm sorry, I always ask
It's
that, I guess.
it's just approaching 6 p.m. in the evening, and the sun's still out, which is a rarity here. So I'm going to go out and enjoy that myself.
Okay. Well, enjoy it, and we will see you along these inclusion trails. Thank you so much, Jermaine Edwards, for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Marcus. I appreciate it.
What an outstanding guest. Uh, and I hope that you will go to Jermaine Edwards, even if you don't take him up on the offer, which I think you should. But JermaineEdwards.com and learn more about his fantastic and amazing journey that continues. I think it speaks volume that he took the time to share this, share so personally with us. And I think it's important that people, when they bring their voices, come in authenticity. And I know that I felt it on this side of the pond. And wherever you are around the world, I'm sure you felt the authentic power and positive force that is Jermaine Edwards. So I want to ask you, is that who you are? Is that what you are doing with your voice? Because Jermaine's right. 20 years from now, even 5 years from now, where do you want to be? You will be somewhere and your voice will be there too. What will be the steps? What will be the milestones? What will be the accomplishments as a result of your being all that God has called you in the earth school to be? Will you stand for and amplify your voice and the voices of others that you can contribute in the meaningful way in which you've been purposed to do? I hope your answer is yes. And I hope to hear about you. Happy Black Inclusion Week. Happy Raise Your Voice Week, wherever you are around the world. And we will see you on these grateful streets between now and next Friday. Take care of yourself and each other.